Unidentified vessel. The Federation flagship ISS Protector cruised through the void of unexplored space, its silver hull gleaming under the light of a billion distant stars. Commander Zorp stood on the bridge, his 4 eyes scanning the readings displayed on the holoscreens around him. "Captain, sensors are picking up an unidentified vessel at the edge of scanning range," Zorp reported. "Configuration unknown. It's not registering as any known species." Captain Krythar turned his head, his scales reflecting the blue glow of the ship displays. "Alter course to intercept. Let's identify this mystery visitor to our space." As the Protector changed heading, the alien vessel came into visual range. Zorp felt a chill run down his spine at the sight. It was tiny compared to their Federation battleship, no more than 50 Xanders in length. But its hull was pitch black and seemed to absorb all light that touched it. The configuration was utterly foreign, all harsh angles and jutting protrusions. "Scan them," Krythar ordered. "I want to know what we're dealing with." "Scans ineffective," the science officer reported, confusion in her voice. "The hull appears to be scattering our scans." "Composition unknown." Krythar clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. "Open a hailing frequency." "Unknown vessel, this is Captain Krythar of the Federation Starship Protector. Identify yourself." Silence was the only reply. The alien ship drifted in the void, inscrutable and unresponsive. "Looks like we'll have to do this the hard way," Krythar said. "Fire the tractor beam. Let's bring them in for a closer look." As the tractor beam lanced out to seize the smaller ship, 2 things happened very quickly. The alien vessel fired maneuvering thrusters, proving far more nimble than any ship its size had a right to be, and as it dodged, it let loose a salvo of directed energy bolts, targeting the tractor beam emitter. The Protector shuddered as the bolts impacted, alarms blaring on the bridge. "Tractor beam disabled," the tactical officer reported. "Minor hull damage." By the void, Zorp swore softly. The firepower coming from that tiny ship was immense, far outclassing anything that size should be able to wield. "Bring weapon systems online, but hold fire," Krythar commanded. "Target their engines and maneuvering thrusters. I want them disabled and in our hangar bay." What followed was a tense, frustrating battle, if it could even be called that. The Protector was like a lumbering giant, swatting at a darting, stinging insect. The alien ship wove and dodged, absorbing punishing hits that should have torn it apart, and all the while it rained down precise, devastating blows against the Protector's key systems. But in the end, the Protector's sheer bulk and power won out. With a final titanic barrage, the alien ship's engines went dark. It listed in space, still mostly intact but clearly disabled. "Bring them into Hangar Bay 7, Krythar said, satisfaction in his voice. "Have a security team meet us there. I think our guests will have much to discuss with us." In the hangar bay, Zorp and Krythar waited tensely with a full complement of armored security personnel as the strange black ship was tractored in. It settled to the deck with a hollow clang, still and silent. "Get that hatch open," Krythar ordered. "I want to have a word with the pilot." The security team moved in, cutting tools sparking against the alien hatch. It resisted them far longer than it should have, the material proving denser and more resilient than expected. But finally, with a screech of tortured metal, they gained entry. The first security officer stepped inside, weapons at the ready, only to stop short. "What in the name of?" His voice cut off abruptly, replaced by a gurgling scream. His vital signs flatlined. More men charged in, only to meet the same fate. Screams and weapons fire echoed from within the ship. "Get me a visual," Krythar barked. A holo display flickered to life, showing a chaotic scene transmitted from the helmet feeds of the dying men. Flashes of weapons fire strobed in the darkness. Armored bodies hit the deck, and among them, moving almost too fast to see, were figures. Bipedal figures, clad in form-fitting black armor, wielding weapons that spat searing light. Zorp felt his blood run cold as he caught a glimpse of one of the aliens' faces through a shattered visor. Pinkish skin, white eyes with blue irises, and a mouth twisted in what could only be described as a predatory grin. In a matter of moments, it was over. The security team was dead, not a single shot of theirs seeming to hit home. Silence fell once more. And then, with a suddenness that made them all flinch, the alien ship exploded. It self-destructed with a force that tore through the hangar bay, consuming itself in a sun-bright ball of plasma. The hangar doors blew out, venting atmosphere and debris into space. Alarms screamed and red emergency lights painted the scene in hellish hues. Hull breach. Fires on multiple decks. FTL drive offline. The damage reports poured in, each one more dire than the last. In the midst of the chaos, Zorp and Kragthar could only stare at one another in mute horror, the same question burning in their eyes. What had they just encountered? And what did it mean for the Federation? Little did they know, in that moment, that the fires currently ravaging the Protector were but candles compared to the conflagration that was to come. The Bipeds had made their first move, and all the galaxy would soon tremble before them. Impossible survivors. The ISS Protector drifted in the void, trailing atmosphere and debris from its ruined hangar bay. Inside, the once proud flagship was a scene of chaos and destruction. Fires raged uncontrolled through multiple decks. Crew members scrambled to contain hull breaches and treat the wounded, and in the flickering emergency lights, an insidious threat moved unseen. Damage report. Captain Kragthar barked, his voice cutting through the cacophony on the bridge. Hull integrity at 43%, the ops officer reported, her voice shaking. FTL drive destroyed. Sublight engines at half capacity. Life support stable for now, but we're venting atmosphere faster than we can replace it. Kragthar slammed a fist against his command chair. The Protector was crippled, stranded light years from any friendly port. They couldn't even call for help with the comms array in ruin. Commander Zorp focused on the immediate problems. Dispatch repair teams to seal the breaches, ration our remaining air, and get me a casualty report from that hangar bay explosion. As if summoned by his words, the door to the bridge hissed open. But instead of the expected damage control officer, a lone figure staggered through, clutching a bloodied arm. "They're here," the man gasped, his eyes wide with terror. "The Bipeds. They're on the ship." A chill ran through the bridge crew. It was impossible. Nothing could have survived the self-destruction of that alien vessel. And yet, clarify, Kragthar demanded, leaning forward in his seat. "We were sealing off the compromised sections around the hangar bay," the crewman said, his voice quavering. "And we found them. Bodies. Not ours. Bipeds. In black armor. At first we thought they were dead, but then they moved." He trailed off, his gaze going distant with remembered horror. Zorp and Kragthar exchanged a look of grim understanding. Somehow, impossibly, some of the alien boarders had survived. And now they were loose on the Protector. "Go to Alert Status 1, Kragthar ordered, his voice grim. "I want all security teams mobilized and sweeping the ship. Find those bipeds and neutralize them." But even as the crew rushed to obey, the true extent of their peril was becoming clear. Reports started flooding in from all over the ship. Sightings of the black armored figures, brutal ambushes in darkened corridors, and a mounting tally of dead. In the dim, flickering light of the damaged ship, the bipeds were in their element. They moved like ghosts, striking from shadows and disappearing again before any organized response could be mustered. And wherever they went, death followed. "They're targeting our critical systems," Zorp realized with a start, staring at the too fast accumulation of red on the ship's schematic. Weapons, shields, engines. It's like they know the ship better than we do. An icy certainty settled in Kragthar's gut. They accessed the computer during the boarding action, downloaded our schematics, our system specs. They're using our own ship against us. It was a chilling insight, hinting at a level of technological prowess and strategic thinking far beyond what the Federation had ever encountered. But there was no time to dwell on it. The Protector was dying by inches, picked apart from within by an enemy that they couldn't even see. "We need to lure them out," Zorp said, desperation sharpening his voice. "Force a confrontation on our terms." "Agreed," Kragthar said. "And I know just the bait." The plan was desperate and dangerous, a trap with the Protector's own computer core as the lure. They would allow a false vulnerability in the system, a tempting backdoor for the Bipeds to exploit, and when they took it, the crew would be waiting. It was a gamble, risking the very heart of the ship, but they were out of options and out of time. Zorp and Kragthar led the team themselves, taking up positions in the dim, humming confines of the computer core chamber. They'd waited in tense silence, weapons trained on the access hatch, barely daring to breathe. The attack, when it came, was sudden and brutal. One moment, the hatch was sealed, the chamber quiet save for the soft beeping of the computers. The next, the hatch exploded inward in a hail of shrapnel and blinding light. Blaster fire filled the air as the bipeds stormed in, their black armor seeming to swallow the light. They moved with a speed and precision that was almost beautiful in its deadliness, weaving through the storm of return fire like wraiths. Zorp found himself face to face with one of them, close enough to see his own reflection in the glossy black visor. He fired, the shot going wide as the bite dodged with inhuman speed. And then a vice-like hand was around his throat, lifting him bodily off the ground. He stared down into that visor, seeing only his own terrified eyes. The bite's head tilted slightly, as if in curiosity. And then Zorp screamed as a blinding pain lanced through his skull, the bite's fingers digging into his temple, and everything went black. When he awoke, it was to a scene of utter devastation. The computer core chamber was a charnel house, the bodies of the crew strewn like broken dolls. Kragthar lay slumped against a sparking console, a neat hole burned through his head. Only Zorp had been spared, left alive for some impossible purpose. And on the flickering screens of the computer core, a single phrase repeated over and over, typed out in the language of the Federation. "Where is Earth?" The question echoed in Zorp's mind as he stared at the carnage, understanding and horror dawning in equal measure. The bipeds hadn't been trying to destroy them. They had been trying to go home. The bipeds' purpose. Zorp staggered through the ruined corridors of the Protector, his mind reeling from the revelation of the bipeds' true goal. Earth, the lost human homeworld. The mythical planet that had spawned the bipedal races ago, before they disappeared into the depths of space, never to be seen again. Until now, the implications were staggering. If these bipeds were indeed the lost humans, returned from millennia of exile, then their technology, their abilities were far beyond anything the Federation had ever encountered. And their intent. Zorp shuddered, remembering the casual ease with which they had torn through the Protector's defenses, the cold precision of their attacks. These were not the actions of explorers or diplomats. These were the moves of a conquering army. He had to stop them, had to find a way to prevent them from reaching the computer core and extracting the coordinates to Earth. Because if they found their way home, Zorp had a sinking feeling that it would spell doom for the Federation and perhaps the galaxy at large. The ship groaned and shuddered around him as he made his way towards the core, the sounds of distant weapons fire and screams echoing through the halls. The bipeds were still on the hunt, systematically eliminating any resistance and securing key systems. Zorp rounded a corner and came face to face with one of them. The biped was crouched over the body of a fallen crewman, a strange device in its hand that seemed to be scanning the courts. It looked up as Zorp skidded to a halt, its visor glinting in the dim emergency lights. For a moment, they stared at each other, the human and the alien, two apex predators sizing each other up. Then the biped moved, blurring into action with a speed that defied belief. Zorp fired, his blaster bolt searing the air where the biped had been a split second before. He felt a rush of air to his left and spun, firing again, but the biped was already gone, vanishing into the shadows as if it had never been. Heart pounding, Zorp pressed on, every sense straining for any sign of another attack. The bipeds seemed to have an uncanny ability to blend into their surroundings, their black armor almost seeming to drink in the light. As he neared the computer core, the resistance grew fiercer. Knots of crewmen fought desperate holding actions against the relentless advance of the bipeds, the tight corridors and intersections becoming choke points of blood and fire. Zorp joined the fray, his blaster spitting death into the oncoming ranks of the enemy. But for every biped that fell, two more seemed to take its place, stepping over the bodies of their fallen comrades without pause. Step by step, the defenders were forced back, leaving a trail of their own dead behind them. The bipeds were taking losses, but it was a price they seemed all too willing to pay. At last, the final defensive line was breached, and Zorp found himself backing into the computer core chamber, the last handful of survivors at his side. They took up positions around the central core, their weapons trained on the single entrance. Here is part 3 of the story, coming in at around 2,100 words. Part 3. The Biped's Purpose. Zorp staggered through the ruined corridors of the Protector, his mind reeling from the revelation of the biped's true goal. Earth, the lost human homeworld. The mythical planet that had spawned the bipedal race eons ago, before they disappeared into the depths of space, never to be seen again. Until now, the implications were staggering. If these bipeds were indeed the lost humans, returned from millennia of exile, then their technology, their abilities, were far beyond anything the Federation had ever encountered. And their intent? Zorp shuddered, remembering the casual ease with which they had torn through the Protector's defenses, the cold precision of their attacks. These were not the actions of explorers or diplomats. These were the moves of a conquering army. He had to stop them, had to find a way to prevent them from reaching the computer core and extracting the coordinates to Earth. Because if they found their way home, Zorp had a sinking feeling that it would spell doom for the Federation, and perhaps the galaxy at large. The ship groaned and shuddered around him as he made his way towards the core, the sounds of distant weapons fire and screams echoing through the halls. The bipeds were still on the hunt, systematically eliminating any resistance and securing key systems. Zorp rounded a corner and came face to face with one of them. The biped was crouched over the body of a fallen crewman, a strange device in its hand that seemed to be scanning the corpse. It looked up as Zorp skidded to a halt, its visor glinting in the dim emergency lights. For a moment, they stared at each other, the human and the alien, two apex predators sizing each other up. Then the biped moved, blurring into action with a speed that defied belief. Zorp fired, his blaster bolt searing the air where the biped had been a split second before. He felt a rush of air to his left and spun, firing again, but the biped was already gone, vanishing into the shadows as if it had never been. Heart pounding, Zorp pressed on, every sense straining for any sign of another attack. The bipeds seemed to have an uncanny ability to blend into their surroundings, their black armor almost seeming to drink in the light. As he neared the computer core, the resistance grew fiercer. Knots of crewmen fought desperate holding actions against the relentless advance of the bipeds, the tight corridors and intersections becoming choke points of blood and fire. Zorp joined the fray, his blaster spitting death into the oncoming ranks of the enemy. But for every biped that fell, two more seemed to take its place, stepping over the bodies of their fallen comrades without pause. Step by step, the defenders were forced back, leaving a trail of their own dead behind them. The bipeds were taking losses, but it was a price they seemed all too willing to pay. At last, the final defensive line was breached, and Zorp found himself backing into the computer core chamber, the last handful of survivors at his side. They took up positions around the central core, their weapons trained on the single entrance. A tense silence fell, broken only by the hum of the computers and the ragged breathing of the defenders. They all knew this was the end. The bipeds would come, and they would die defending the core. But perhaps, just perhaps, they could buy enough time for the Protector's distress signal to reach friendly space, for reinforcements to arrive and drive these invaders back to the void that spawned them. The minutes ticked by, each one an eternity. And then, with a suddenness that made them all start, the hatch hissed open. A single Bipe stepped through, its armor scorched and pitted from the fighting, but its bearing as proud and lethal as ever. It surveyed the defenders, its gaze lingering on Zorp. "Surrender the core," it said, its voice a harsh, mechanical rasp, rendered tinny by its helmet speakers. "Your ship is lost. Your crew is dead. Further resistance is futile." Zorp felt a shock run through him at the sound of the Federation's language coming from this creature. He had known they were intelligent, but to hear it speak. "We will never surrender," he said, his own voice sounding thin and reedy in comparison. "We will fight to the last to defend the Federation." The Bipe's head tilted slightly, as if in curiosity. "The Federation," it repeated, as if tasting the word. "A pitiful collection of weak, divided races, clinging to the scraps of power. You have grown complacent in your dominance, and now your time is at an end." It took a step forward, and the defenders tensed, fingers tightening on triggers. "We are the future," the Bipe said, its voice rising, taking on a zealous, almost fanatical tone. "We are the rightful inheritors of the galaxy, and we will take what is ours, by right of conquest and strength." "You're insane," Zorp spat. "You're a relic of a bygone age, a remnant of a dead race. You have no place in this galaxy anymore." The Bipe laughed, the sound harsh and grating. "No place. We will make a place, carve it out with fire and blood if we must. Starting with Earth, the home world that was stolen from us. And then, the rest of your precious Federation will follow." Zorp's eyes widened in sudden understanding. "You don't just want to go home," he said slowly. "You want to use Earth as a base, a staging ground for an invasion." "Very good," the Bipe said, a hint of mocking praise in its voice. "You begin to see the shape of things to come, but it is too late for you and for your Federation." It raised a hand, and the hatch behind it slid open again. More Bipeds poured through, a tide of black armor and lethal intent. "Kill them all," the leader said, almost casually, "and secure the core. Earth awaits." The Bipeds opened fire, and the chamber dissolved into chaos. Consoles exploded and screens shattered as stray shots went wild. The defenders returned fire, the air thick with the stench of ozone and burning plastic. Zorp ducked and weaved, his blaster spitting death, fighting with a desperate fury born of the knowledge that this was the end. The end of the Protector, the end of its crew, and perhaps the end of the Federation itself. All around him, his crewmates fell, cut down by the relentless advance of the Bipeds. They fought bravely, taking many of the enemy with them, but it was a losing battle from the start. At last, only Zorp remained, backed up against the central core, surrounded by a ring of Bipeds. He was wounded, bleeding from a dozen cuts and burns, his blaster's power cell drained to nothing. The leader stepped forward, its armor spattered with the blood of Zorp's fallen comrades. "It is over," it said, almost gently. "You have fought well, but you have lost. Give me the coordinates to Earth, and I will grant you a quick death." Zorp spat blood, his eyes defiant. "Never," he snarled. "I will die before I betray the Federation." The Bipe nodded, as if it had expected no other answer. "So be it," it said, and raised its weapon. But before it could fire, a sudden, blinding light filled the chamber, a swirling vortex of energy, coalescing out of thin air behind the Bipeds. They spun, weapons raised, but too late. From the depths of the vortex, a tide of armored figures poured forth. Not Bipeds, but Federation soldiers, clad in the distinctive armor of the elite guard. They fell upon the Bipeds like avenging angels, their weapons spitting blue fire. The battle was short and brutal. Caught off guard and outnumbered, the Bipeds fought with the fury of cornered beasts. But they were outmatched. One by one, they fell, until only the leader remained, ringed by a circle of Federation guns. "Surrender," the lead guard said, her voice cold and hard. "It's over." For a long moment, the bite was silent. Then, slowly, it reached up and removed its helmet. Zorp stared in shock. The face beneath was human, but twisted, altered almost beyond recognition. Pallid skin was stretched tight over a skull-like visage, shot through with glowing cybernetics. Eyes that had once been blue now shone a baleful red. "Over?" the creature said, its voice a rasping whisper. "No, this is only the beginning. We are Legion, and we are coming. Earth will be ours, and the Federation will burn." With a final defiant roar, it raised its weapon to its own head and pulled the trigger. As the echoes of the shot faded, Zorp slumped back against the core, his strength finally failing. The last thing he saw before darkness claimed him was the worried face of the guard commander, bending over him. "Hold on," she said, her voice seeming to come from a great distance. "Help is here. You're going to be all right." But as he slipped into unconsciousness, Zorp knew that nothing would ever be all right again. The Bipeds had been defeated here, but at a terrible cost. The Protector was lost, its crew decimated. And somewhere out there, beyond the edges of known space, the rest of the Bite race waited, ready to descend upon the unsuspecting Federation in a tide of fire and death. The war had only just begun. Last stand. Zorp floated in a haze of pain and medication, drifting in and out of consciousness as the Federation medics worked to repair his broken body. He caught snatches of conversation, hushed whispers of the destruction of the Protector, the loss of so many lives. But one word kept repeating, a whisper that grew to a shout in his fevered dreams. Earth. The Bipeds sought Earth, the lost homeworld of humanity, and they would stop at nothing to find it. As his strength returned, so did his resolve. He had to stop them, had to find a way to protect Earth and the Federation from the coming storm. Here is part 4 of the story, coming in at around 2,000 words. Part 4. Last Stand. Zorp floated in a haze of pain and medication, drifting in and out of consciousness as the Federation medics worked to repair his broken body. He caught snatches of conversation, hushed whispers of the destruction of the Protector, the loss of so many lives. But one word kept repeating, a whisper that grew to a shout in his fevered dreams. Earth. The Bipeds sought Earth, the lost homeworld of humanity, and they would stop at nothing to find it. As his strength returned, so did his resolve. He had to stop them, had to find a way to protect Earth and the Federation from the coming storm. He struggled out of the med bay, ignoring the protests of the doctors, and made his way to the command deck of the Valiant, the elite guard ship that had rescued him. There he found Commander Nera, the leader of the guard force. "Commander," he said, his voice still weak but determined, "we have to stop them. The Bipeds, they'll be coming for Earth." Nera turned to face him, her expression grim. "I know," she said. "We intercepted their transmissions before we attacked. They've sent the coordinates to Earth to the rest of their fleet." Zorp felt a chill run through him. "Then we have to get there first. Warn Earth, shore up its defenses." Nera shook her head. "Earth is a myth, a legend. No one knows where it is, or if it even exists." "The Bipeds know," Zorp said. "And if they find it, they'll use it as a base to attack the Federation. We have to stop them." Nera was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, she nodded. "All right," she said. "We'll set a course for the coordinates they transmitted. But I warn you, we might be flying into a trap." Zorp met her gaze steadily. "If we don't try, the Federation is doomed anyway." The journey to Earth was long and tense, the crew of the Valiant on high alert for any sign of the Biped fleet. But space remained empty, the stars cold and silent. At last, they arrived at the coordinates the Bipeds had transmitted. And there, hanging in the void like a blue and green jewel, was a planet unlike any Zorp had ever seen. Earth. It was a world of oceans and continents, of swirling white clouds and glittering city lights on the night side. It was beautiful, and yet there was something haunting about it, a sense of age and hidden secrets. The Valiant took up orbit, and Zorp and Nera led a landing party to the surface. They set down in a sprawling city, towering spires of glass and steel reaching for the sky. But the city was empty, its streets and buildings abandoned. There was no sign of life, human or otherwise. They searched, scouring the planet for any clue as to the fate of the human race. But they found only ruins and echoes, the remnants of a civilization long gone. And then, as they stood in the heart of a crumbling city square, a shadow fell over them. They looked up, and their blood ran cold. A biked fleet, vaster than any they had ever seen, hung in the sky above Earth. Thousands of ships, each one bristling with weapons and filled with the lethal black-armored warriors. The trap had been sprung. The bipeds descended on the planet like a swarm of locusts, their ships darkening the sky. The Valiant and its crew fought bravely, but they were hopelessly outnumbered and outgunned. Zorp found himself on the front lines, fighting side by side with Nera and her guard as the bipeds closed in. They took cover in the ruins of the city, using the twisted metal and shattered concrete as barricades against the unending tide of enemy fire. But it was a losing battle. One by one, the defenders fell, cut down by the relentless advance of the bipeds. They fought with a desperate fury, taking many of the enemy with them, but it wasn't enough. Nera fell, a biked blade finding a gap in her armor. She died in Zorp's arms, her blood staining the ancient stones of Earth. Zorp fought on, his grief and rage giving him strength. But in the end, even he could not stand against the might of the biked horde. He was driven back, step by step, until he found himself in the heart of the city, backed up against the wall of a towering building. The bipeds ringed him, their weapons trained on his battered armor. The leader stepped forward, its helmet removed to reveal the twisted, cybernetic visage beneath. "Surrender," it rasped, its voice a metallic echo. "You have lost. Earth is ours." Zorp lifted his head, meeting the creature's gaze with defiant eyes. "Never," he said, his voice steady despite his wounds. "Earth is not yours to take, and the Federation will never bow to you." The biped leader laughed, the sound harsh and grating. "The Federation is weak," it said. "Divided and complacent. It will fall, as Earth has fallen, and we will claim our rightful place as the masters of the galaxy." It raised its weapon, aiming at Zorp's heart. "Any last words, defender of a doomed race?" Zorp smiled, a slow, feral baring of teeth. "Just two," he said. "Look up." The biked leader frowned, then turned its gaze skyward. Its eyes widened in shock. Streaking down from the sky, wreathed in the fire of atmospheric entry, were thousands of ships. Not biped, but Federation. A vast armada, drawn from every corner of the galaxy, united in defense of their homeworld. At their head was a ship Zorp knew all too well. The ISS Dauntless, the pride of the Federation fleet. And on its bridge, he knew, would be Admiral Vera, the greatest military mind the Federation had ever known. The bipeds reacted with lightning speed, their ships rising to meet the new threat. But they were too late. The Federation fleet hit them like a hammer, tearing through their ranks with devastating precision. The battle raged in the skies above Earth, the planet's surface lit by the flashes of exploding ships and the crisscrossing beams of energy weapons. The bipeds fought with their usual ferocity, but against the united might of the Federation, they stood no chance. One by one, their ships fell, burning from the sky to crash into the ruins of Earth's cities, and on the ground, the tide turned as well, as Zorp and the surviving defenders rallied, bolstered by the knowledge that they were not alone. In the end, it was Zorp who faced down the biked leader, in a duel amidst the rubble of a shattered skyscraper. They fought with blade and blaster, with fist and claw, in a battle that would become legend. And when it was over, when the biped leader lay dead at Zort's feet, and the last of the invaders had been driven from the planet, the Federation stood victorious. Earth was saved, the biped threat vanquished. But the cost had been high. The Protector lost with all hands. The Valiant sacrificed in defense of Earth. And so many brave souls, human and alien alike, fallen in the battle for the future. As Zorp stood amidst the ruins, gazing up at the smoke-filled sky, he knew that this was not the end. The bipeds had been defeated, but they would return. And the Federation must be ready. For the war for Earth, for the very future of the galaxy, had only just begun. A dire warning. The aftermath of the battle for Earth was a time of grief and rebuilding. The planet, once a shining beacon of human civilization, lay in ruins, its cities shattered, its people scattered to the winds. But amidst the destruction, there was also hope. The Federation had come together as never before, united in the face of the biped threat. Alliances were forged, old grievances set aside in the name of survival. And at the heart of it all was Commander Zorp, the hero of Earth, the one who had faced down the biped leader and lived to tell the tale. He stood now on the bridge of the ISS Dauntless, gazing out at the stars. The ship was in orbit around Earth, part of the massive Federation fleet that now guarded the planet, a constant vigil against the return of the bipeds. Admiral Vera stood beside him, her face lined with weariness and sorrow. The battle for Earth had taken a heavy toll on her, as it had on all of them. "We've received reports from the outer colonies," she said, her voice heavy. "The bipeds have been sighted, probing our defenses, testing our resolve." Zorp nodded, unsurprised. "They'll be back," he said. "Earth was just the beginning. They won't rest until they've conquered the entire galaxy. And we'll be ready for them," Vera said, steel in her voice. "The Federation will not fall. Not on my watch." Zorp turned to face her, his expression grave. "Admiral, there's something you need to know. Something I learned on the Protector before." He trailed off, the memories still raw. Vera placed a hand on his shoulder, a gesture of comfort and support. "Go on," she said gently. Zorp took a deep breath. "The bipeds, they're not just another alien race," he said. "They're humans, or at least they were, long ago." Vera's eyes widened in shock. "What?" "I saw it," Zorp said, "when I faced their leader. Under the armor, the cybernetics, it was human. Twisted and changed almost beyond recognition, but human." Vera was silent for a long moment, processing this revelation. "But how?" she said at last. "How did they become this?" Zorp shook his head. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I found something in the ruins of Earth, a data device hidden in the rubble." He held out a small metallic object, its surface scored and pitted. Vera took it, turning it over in her hands. "What is it?" she asked. "A warning," Zorp said, "and a history of what happened to the humans after they left Earth." He tapped a control, and a holographic display sprang to life above the device. Images flashed by, snippets of video and audio, fragments of a long-lost past. They saw the humans leaving Earth in great arc ships, setting out to colonize the stars. They saw them discovering new worlds, making contact with alien races, forging a great galactic civilization. But then, something changed. The humans began to alter themselves, augmenting their bodies with cybernetics and genetic modifications. They became something other, something inhuman. And as they changed, so too did their ambitions. No longer content with peaceful exploration and diplomacy, they turned to conquest and domination. They became the bipeds, a race of relentless warriors, bent on subjugating all life in the galaxy. The images faded, and Vera looked up, her face pale. "My God," she whispered. "The bipeds, they're our future, what we could become if we're not careful." Zorp nodded solemnly. "The data device contains coordinates," he said, "to the Biped homeworld, the place where they first transformed themselves. If we can get there, find out what happened, maybe we can stop it from happening to us." Vera was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, she nodded. "Set a course," she said. "We have to know, have to understand, if we're going to have any chance of stopping them." The Dauntless broke orbit, setting out into the void, towards the unknown. Behind them, Earth receded, a blue and green jewel amidst the stars, a reminder of all they had fought for, and all they stood to lose. As they journeyed deeper into uncharted space, Zorp couldn't shake a sense of foreboding. The Bipeds had been defeated at Earth, but he knew that was only the beginning. They would return, stronger and more relentless than ever. And the Federation. The Federation was strong, but it was not invincible. The cracks were already starting to show, old rivalries and resentments bubbling to the surface in the aftermath of the battle. If they were to have any hope of surviving the coming storm, they would need to be united. To stand together against the darkness, no matter the cost. For in the end, Zorp knew, it would not be the strength of their ships or the power of their weapons that would decide the fate of the galaxy. It would be the strength of their spirit, the unbreakable bonds of their fellowship. As he gazed out at the stars, he could almost feel the weight of destiny upon them. The future was uncertain, the path ahead fraught with peril. But one thing was clear. The war for the galaxy had only just begun. And the Federation, the last bastion of hope and light in a universe consumed by darkness, would need every ounce of courage and determination it could muster. For the Bipeds were coming, and this time they would not stop until the galaxy itself lay shattered at their feet.